Welcome to CSM Mastermind, everyone. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about fundamentals of negotiation. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, now with more than 18,000 students from, as I mentioned before, 92 countries. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps, and we're now accepting registrations for our fall 12-week live coaching programs that are being offered under the University of San Francisco School of Management. Our next cohorts launch in mid-September, and Ashley is going to drop a special coupon code that's good through the end of the month for those interested in joining me for the final set of coaching cohorts for 2022. Those coaching cohorts are a lot of fun. Would definitely recommend that you check those out. We also have a number of standalone courses taught by industry experts, including data-driven decision-making, having difficult conversations, change management for customer success, outcome-based selling, and what successful managers do, our management training and coaching program that is taught by one of our guests here, Patrick James. Find out more at successcoaching.co. For those of you that haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that is relevant to customer-facing individuals. I don't want to just say customer success. Anybody in a customer-facing role can get value out of what we talk about. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. If you go to there, you'll see an events tab at the top of the page. Click on that to find out more and to sign up for the next event. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Thank you, Ashley. This webinar is recorded, and we will be posting a replay along with a transcription on our website early next week. We will be taking questions later during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to either ask a question or upvote something that you see there that you also want to hear about. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, and we've got somebody monitoring that feed. Thank you, Tracy. So if you have questions and you're watching on LinkedIn Live, please post them and they'll be relayed to us. Also, please make sure to keep all commentary to the chat window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started, as usual, in alphabetical order with Dan.
Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you. Dan Roberts here. I'm an account executive at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for around 6 years now and have moved my way up the chain. And something unique about being an account executive in a customer success forum here is at Salesforce, I only have 2 customers. So I have no other choice but to focus on customer success. And I've been at other companies where AE is pre-sale only, but that's not the case in my role. So I'm definitely passionate about this, and I'm really excited to be here today. Calling in from Orleans, Cape Cod, but normally out of Denver, Colorado.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. I was going to ask you about that, but you preempted me. So I'm glad that you explained that. And I appreciate you making the time for us. Yeah, you are. Yeah, we're on the same. That's great. All right, Patrick, you're up, my friend.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Patrick James. I'm the founder and one of the consultants at Enroad, ENROAD. And what we do is we do consulting and coaching around project management, change management, systems and system implementations, really working with teams to keep projects from going sideways. And there's also some remediation sometimes that we're brought in to do. But really our sweet spot is really coaching managers on how to manage. We have worked with Gallup and the Clifton Strengths. And also, I'm very proud to be one of the coaches here at Success Coaching, and created, as Andrew said, the course called What Successful Managers Do, where we have a 12-week program where we work with managers on how to be successful and how to manage others. I'm also a adjunct professor at San Francisco State University, teaching management information systems. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Andrew.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Always great to have you on the program. And finally, last but not least, Ryan.
Hey, everybody. My name is Ryan Ford. I'm coming to you from Mesa, Arizona, warm state, so it's always nice. I am a client success manager for OpenDoc LoadSmart. I've been with the company for about 3 years. We've been through a few acquisitions, so the name's changed a couple of times, but been with the same team for about 3 years. Daily handle contract renewals as well as price increases and pricing discussions. So handle negotiations on a daily basis with multiple levels of clients, anywhere from individual warehouse owners all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. So a broad spectrum of client base as well as financial means. So do a lot of heavy negotiations on a daily basis. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I spend a lot of time trying to help people kind of get over some of their fears of negotiation, getting to the core of the problem in the negotiation process. And so excited for the conversation. Really glad Andrew and the team at Success Coaching invited me to this, and looking forward to even possibly learn some things from Patrick and Dan. So thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. And I don't think I mentioned this to you during our prep call. My oldest son, 22-year-old name is Ryan.
Oh, and, okay, cool.
Did you know that Ryan means little king?
I do, actually.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
Of course he does.
So there you go. All right.
There you go.
Hey, to do with that what you want, right? Especially in negotiation, right?
Exactly. You got it.
Awesome. All right. Once again, we all appreciate your time today. Now let's get to the topic. Regardless of whether you're personally responsible for negotiating the terms of renewals or not, negotiation in any customer-facing role is an important skill to possess. Customer success managers find themselves negotiating when they're trying to maintain scope, determine the next milestone on a customer journey, or even when helping enable adoption. Possessing strong negotiation skills can help you better navigate a customer journey and understand their needs better. And this ultimately helps improve retention and strengthen your relationship with the customer. Being able to negotiate skillfully means being able to work out a deal with everyone, from your customers to your leaders. And these are skills that are extremely valuable in customer success. Or are they? Are we overblowing the importance of being able to negotiate?
So I want to jump in there to kick things off. And no, I don't think we are. Negotiating is every part of how I operate my business. And I think of it in three ways. So negotiating can be internal versus external. It can be about a deal, whether it's a renewal, a new deal, an upsell, or it can be about just moving a relationship forward. And one thing one of my early managers shared with me that I've kept with me forever is friction breeds progress. And friction is all over any sort of negotiation. So, for me at Salesforce, it's a large company. We have a lot of products. There's a lot of people involved. Like I said at the intro, I only have 2 customers. So negotiating internally is probably like 50 or 60% of my job, trying to get the right people in front of my customer at the right time to help them with whatever they're doing. And there are 60,000 other customer-facing people trying to do that. So I have to constantly negotiate. And then I think about, obviously the renewals or terms of a deal or when deals get done. I think that's pretty obvious about account executives. But the piece around just moving a relationship forward, negotiating on what's core value to you as a customer, what are you trying to accomplish? How are you feeling about your relationship with Salesforce or whatever vendor it is? And understanding who needs to make decisions, how these decisions need to be made, and who's impacted. So I think there's just negotiating is a core tenet of how we engage with really everyone in my role.
I actually think negotiation is just a core tenet of
life,
dealing with everybody. I negotiate on a daily basis with my 13-year-old. Patrick, Ryan, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you look at negotiation, like you said, it's about a 13-year-old, and someone asked me about like negotiation. I'm like, well, I've been married for almost 30 years now. I'm like, I've been negotiating, a master negotiator for the last 30 years.
Yeah. And how many wins do you have during that time?
And again, it's about success.
Yes.
And it's not about wins or loses. It's about, hey,
mutual success.
Exactly. The mutual success. And I think that's, when people start thinking about negotiation, they get in, the mindset that negotiation is like going to a car lot. Like, I got to be tough. I'm going to rigid. I'm going to work them. And it's just like, that's really not negotiation, because, I mean, yes, that's part of it, but it's really about having the right mindset going into it. Really negotiation is about, having a productive conversation to reveal and explore each other's interests and to reach a common ground. And so many people get in the mindset that negotiation is about winning and losing. And, that kind of gets into positional bargaining, and we'll probably, eventually get to what positional bargaining is, but it's really about going in and about having a learning mindset. I'm here to learn what your interests are.
Yeah. So Ryan, Patrick threw out the automotive reference, and I know you come from that world. Anything to add?
Yeah. So, part of my background that, Andrew and the rest of the guys have kind of heard about, I've got some retail sales and service management experience from the automotive world. That's kind of where I came from before OpenDoc. And so, Patrick speaks on kind of trying to get away from a positional, bargaining type of negotiation. And I, listening to him and kind of taking some of that in, definitely see the value in trying to dig deeper and think a little bit more thoughtfully when it comes to the negotiation process. Being in some of those previous positions, though, I see the value and the importance of being able to skillfully negotiate when you're in that process of that transactional process. Eventually, inevitably, you're gonna get to that point of having to discuss price. That's for my position specifically, and I know for a lot of other client success managers, customer success managers, people in our role, eventually we do get to price. And so having the skill set that Patrick, is talking about, and really being able to, understand what your client is looking for and what their needs are, and then taking all of that, and when you get into that kind of transactional negotiation process, trying to minimize that. Don't focus on that. Be knowledgeable of what is going to possibly come up in that transactional phase, and then move past it. But having the confidence and knowledge and kind of a game plan when you get into that transactional phase. With all of those other tools, it really shortens that process. You've built rapport with your client. They have trust in you. They have trust in your product. And so you're able to move past the transaction phase and get the price that you're looking for. A lot of times we're trying to get longer term renewals, or we're trying to get more money out of our client. And so really having that foundation that Patrick talks about, I think is very helpful when you get to that transactional phase.
Well, and once again, I think, as I let off, it's not just negotiations when it comes to price. It's negotiations when it could be negotiations for scope. It could be a negotiation for the next milestone. It could be a negotiation if you're in the support role, right? Here's the best way to approach addressing this particular issue. So, but we talked about this proficiency in negotiation has a lot to do with the right mindset. So what are some of the, and we've touched on a few of these, what are some of the steps involved in successfully negotiating? I mean, we talked, Patrick, you mentioned preparation is super important.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one where most people should be spending the time, but they don't. And so, yeah, I think Ryan shaking his head. And that's really, and it's looking at it from what is your interests in this relationship, and then turning the coin over and saying, well, what is the person that I'm going to be working with or I'm going to be negotiating? What are their interests? Why are they at the table? And what options do we have? What options do they have? How is, and I think looking at it also like who are the stakeholders that need to be brought in from our side and preparing with them and having a conversation. A lot of times people just start jumping right to the negotiation. It's like, no, there's a lot of preparation that needs to take place first.
So let's, I want to take a step back there. We bring it, understanding the people that are at the table. Dan, how does, and you've done a lot of negotiations yourself, especially as an account executive, what role does empathy play in the entire negotiation process where you've got to, understand the perspective of the people that you're dealing with?
Yeah, it plays a huge role, and especially in this virtual world, you never know what's going on with someone on a day-to-day basis as they step away from the Zoom or step into the Zoom. So I think empathy plays an enormous role in this, and it's really just getting down to the human level and trying to get, the weirdness out of the way. And let's stop trying to pretend like, and Patrick, you mentioned this, in our prep call, like this isn't or shouldn't be at least a zero-sum game. This should be an opportunity for us to figure out what we have in common, how we can mutually help each other, and be open and upfront about, where I am to gain. Especially as a salesperson, I have to sometimes remind my customers I am in sales and I get paid on these things. And, I have to prioritize my time. So I think empathy is really important to lead with. It humanizes the conversation and helps, in my mind, reduce some of the awkwardness.
What about active listening? Ryan, how important is active listening, do you think, to negotiating?
So I think if we take some of what Patrick said, some of what Dan said, talking about empathy, talking about stepping away from that transactional phase of the negotiation and really trying to gain a better understanding of our client, I think that active listening is the cornerstone of negotiation. So I think when you're going through the process of your interactions with your clients, you're building rapport with them. You're actively listening to what success looks like to them. You're actively listening to some of the pain points that they're experiencing day to day. So you're being empathetic to what they have, and you're kind of preparing yourself for any possible bumps in the relationship. So if you're actively listening and you're really paying close attention to what your client is telling you, there shouldn't be a surprise. And you're also going to be able to overcome any possible objections they have when you're in that negotiation phase. If it's a price point, or if it's a timeline for an escalated support issue, or if it's a feature request that they have, you should, because you've been actively listening, already have an answer for them. And so you're going to be able to overcome those objections. And so all of that centers around that active listening skill. I've been following success coaching for a while. I've been to a lot of these seminars and heard, active listening just being drilled into our heads as successful client success managers. We need to be active listeners. And I think that skill is especially important when it comes to negotiations, because you, at that point, are almost aware of what potential issues are going to come up. You're going to have that answer, and you're going to be able to overcome that. And it's going to really show your client that not only are you prepared for this negotiation, but you've been listening empathetically. And to Patrick's point, you're going to have that game plan ready to go. You're going to come prepared. And so it just gives you more confidence. And I think it also gives you a better position in the bargaining table.
Well, I think it builds credibility.
Absolutely.
It establishes trust. Right. And you're right. I'm always, whenever I have a chance, I'm always talking about how important active listening and empathy is, and asking open-ended questions as part of that, because it opens up a channel of communication. Hey, this person is listening to me. I'm going to share with them because they're listening to me. When my daughter, I'm talking to my daughter and she starts looking at TikTok, my conversation pretty much peters out. right? What's the point? She's not listening to me, right? So it's super important that we're actively listening and asking open-ended questions so we can, get that response. Speaking of open-ended questions, Patrick, Dan, is that one of those skills that you think is active listening, open-ended questions, empathy, skills that how do you build those negotiation skills? Those are so important. What suggestions do actually all of you have in building those types of skills?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one first. So, I'm a firm believer in trial by fire, and experience breeds confidence, right? So, I think that not just in your job, but in your personal life, start viewing things as a negotiation, and then practice those skills in your day-to-day life, and then try to keep track of the failures and the wins, and then try to establish, okay, why did you fail, and then why did you win? And then I think that'll help. Me personally, kind of going back into my work history when I was, doing retail, sales and service management for for RV companies and automotive shops, that I was very nervous to negotiate with people. I didn't want to do it. I felt too much like a salesman. And so I started practicing it, with my coworkers, with my family, and then, reading material. And so I think that was where I found my success, was trying to live a negotiation, or trying to live every scenario as a negotiation, and then try to find those successes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to build off of what Ryan just said. I think, because there was three questions there around proficiency, about active listening and how it plays into it, as well as building skills. And you're right, absolutely, Ryan. You start small, look at, change your mindset about how you view negotiation. It's a conversation. And one of the things that I teach a lot of managers on how to do is start or move away from getting so much wrapped around the what, like what are they asking, to why. Asking why is a powerful question in negotiation. It generates kind of like an active listening. It shows you're active and it shows that you're curious, but it also draws out that person's interests of what they need from you, whatever you're selling, and it establishes kind of that foundation. And so get used to like asking why. So if someone comes and says, I want a 10% discount, well, why? And it's like, well, because. Now their boss could have said like, well, I need you to get 10%, or the board could have said, I need you to 10% discount. But then ask the question of, well, why not 8? Why not 12? How did you come to 10%? And then they'll start revealing more and more, and then ask more questions about why. And actually, Andrew, I know in in the customer success training, we talk about the 5 whys.
5 whys. Yeah. 5 whys is a great technique. What's interesting about your particular situation is, hey, maybe we haven't done a good job demonstrating the value, disseminating the value, making sure that the people who are responsible for signing the checks understand the value that's been created. Or maybe it's just some procurement person that wants to get their kind of pound of flesh so they can justify their role.
Yeah. And I want to add one thing onto active listening. Patrick, I really like the why comment. That's really important for me to understand why my customers are changing or demanding something. But in active listening, something that changed for me about 6 years ago, basically when I joined Salesforce, was being present. Really, forgetting about that inner monologue of what else do I have to ask them? How else do I have to? And just be present, be curious, just imagine you're sitting next to someone, I don't know, on a park bench, and you're talking about their kid at the park. You're curious about what grade they're in, what sports they like to play, what instruments they play. Act like that in work, and you'll find you'll get to the answer you need much faster.
Yeah, it's amazing when we're present. We turn off the devices, we turn off the email. You should never be meeting with any customer, let alone negotiating with anybody, without showing up and being completely present for them and listening. Just a reminder, by the way, we will be taking questions. We got a few in there, so please don't be shy. Throw a few questions in there. Allison threw out. She beat me to it. A book that I have recommended many times on this webinar. And at some point, I'm going to try and get Chris Voss to show up for one of these webinars. But Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is a fantastic book. Chris talks about negotiation from the perspective of an FBI negotiator. I got to believe I've helped his book sales, because I talk about it all the time. It's one of my favorite business books now. But definitely check out Never Split the Difference. So yeah, this is all about understanding your customer's perspective, their interests, defining what's in it for each party, and getting out of that as we talked about in the prep call, getting out of that positional bargaining mindset, right? What we're trying to accomplish here is a win-win. We really are. We want everybody to feel good leaving this situation. Let's see. I know a lot of people get scared of negotiation, right? When you hear negotiation, people get, especially in customer-facing roles. I've heard it, not sales, but in post-sales, customer-facing roles, people think like negotiation is a bad word. But I think that you shouldn't be scared, and then quite frankly, you're probably doing some negotiation regardless, whether you think so or not.
Well, actually, I'm going to key off of that, Andrew, if I may. I think it's really about knowing yourself. Socrates, know thyself. If you have a personality or kind of that you're avoidant and you kind of want the status quo, or you have a compromising type of nature, collaborate, partner with someone who may have strengths that would be complementary to you going into a negotiation. That's part of the preparation of saying, look, I know this is going to get difficult. It may be very contentious. And so I need to bring someone else in the team that may have much more of a competitive type of nature. They may have those strengths. And so I'm going to partner with them so that we go in together. And then there's others. There's many in the customer success or customer facing roles that are, collaborative nature oozes throughout those customer facing roles. And so look for those people who are collaborative, because studies show those are really the best negotiators. Most people think that the people that are competitive are. Actually, they're not. It's those people that are most collaborative.
Yeah, it's interesting. Did you mention the collaboration? Are anybody familiar with the Thomas Kilmann model, where you've got assertiveness versus cooperativeness in negotiation? And it's actually one of the frameworks that we teach as part of our negotiation course. But it talks about the different options that we have when we're handling conflict, and the ideal situation is collaboration. I win, you win. Yeah. Right? That's what we're aiming for. That's how everybody walks away feeling good about what's just happened.
Yeah, so
all right. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no. So I just wanted to kind of follow up on with what Patrick was saying when it comes to kind of how to get over that nervousness when you're coming into that negotiation phase. So I think that, when we start preparing ourselves to enter that meeting or enter that call, I think the active listening skills that we've been using, active note taking, having, a plan in place before you even enter the call is highly important. And then leverage, touching on what Patrick said as well, leveraging the team that's around you. I know that, in previous meetings that I've had, I knew that the audience in that call, I was going to have to bring in some additional, people on my team. Going to have to bring in some leadership. So knowing the audience of the call is highly important as well, and making sure that you're matching the energy of the client. So if you're going to just be meeting directly with an individual contributor, then it's just going to be you and that person, and that's not a problem. But if they're going to bring in, the next level of management, possibly, director level, or even, senior level leadership or executive level leadership, then you should be matching that energy, and you should be bringing that in.
Very much. That's all part of the prep. I normally don't do this, but I just want to show, I normally don't share a slide during these webinars, but I just want people to understand this Thomas Kilmann model, right? It's got all of these quadrants, and we're looking for collaboration, right? I win, you win, right? If I'm competing, I win. If I take a competing approach, I win, you lose. If I take an approach of avoidance, I lose and you lose. If I accommodate, I lose, you win. And if we compromise, I win and lose, and you win and lose. So we are much. And, when I first started reading this and I first saw it, I'm like, oh, we need to compromise. No, we need to collaborate. We want everybody to win. We truly want to be this to be something that's a win-win. So,
but piggybacking off of that, I think being realistic, there's very, very few scenarios where both parties win 100%. And I think you need to,
that's fair.
As we are being prepared, be prepared on what levers are most important to you and where you think the customer may be really, really valuing certain levers. Because even with that, we both win, there's likely going to be compromise, whether it's on timeline or project scope, whatever it is. But I do think negotiation can get challenging there and can get a little hairy. I'm seeing a lot of questions out there talking about.
We're going to jump into that in a second, but I agree with you. It's actually one of you guys just like rattled off a bunch of the things that are in the content. Determining your priorities, right? You need to be prepared. You need to be prepared with your opening ask, but you also need to understand what your priorities are, because there is going to be some give and take. But see, I don't necessarily look at that as compromise. I look at that as collaboration, right? I think you can look at it both ways. It could be compromise. It could be collaboration. If you've done your prep, if you've done your homework, if you've determined your priorities, then you should be in a position to be able to collaborate with whoever you're negotiating with and both walk away feeling satisfied. Because at the end of the day, we want everybody to feel like, I got what I needed out of this, and they got what they needed out of this. So hey, let's take some questions. Let me go switch this to most upvotes, because that is how we do it. And our first question comes from Brian. Brian asks, what is your personal approach to clients who negotiate over aggressively, perhaps beyond the mutual business partnership benefits? What is the best avenue to build that two-way bridge without pushing them away or having an at-cost relation or having it cost your relationship as a growing company in need of more growth in this market? It looks like Dan raised his hand first, wants to jump in on this. So Dan, what have you got for Brian?
I don't have a lot, but I just, for the clients and customers that over aggressively negotiate, I think at least in my experience, it has been very much a facade. They have been taught to be over aggressive, and they are trying to stake their claim. So my advice is be calm, stick with the plan, try to humanize the conversation. And if there is really a point where they're being too aggressive, and you schedule a 30-minute meeting with them, it's okay to end that meeting after 15 minutes and realize that you're not getting to where you need to go. And you might need to reevaluate what is really important to the client and what's really important to you.
That's great. Great suggestion. Patrick, Ryan, anything to add?
Nothing to add, just to reinforce Dan's point. It's very key not to match their energy. If they get hyper aggressive, don't get hyper aggressive back, because that's just you're going to butt heads, and it's going to create a kind of a toxic negotiation process. Go back to the open-ended questions. Go back to that active listening, and try to ask some questions where you can get to the core of why they're being so aggressive. And then you can go back to empathy at that point, and typically that'll calm them down. It'll kind of slow down the negotiation process and bring them down to your level. So I definitely agree with everything Dan said. And then, the one thing that I want to make sure that I get across is stay calm. Me personally, I'm a very I get hyped up. Like especially in the negotiation process, just because of some of my background, like I get hyped. I love the negotiation process. It's a lot of fun for me. So when the client gets hyped up, it's really easy for me to fall into that. And so I constantly have to drill it into my own head. Hey, calm down. Don't get excited. So you definitely stay calm in the negotiation process, and that'll take you a lot further.
Two things to add is one, a few weeks ago, Andrew, we had a leadership around series around having difficult conversations.
Yep.
And there was a lot of great points that the panel dove into there. But I look at, the book, Crucial Conversations. For me, when things kind of get into that fight or flight kind of just intense, it's about returning it back to productive dialogue. And for me personally, I just kind of almost like a mantra start repeating to myself, and this comes from the book, what do I really want? What do I want out of this relationship? And so for me, that helps ground me. And when it gets heated, when people are becoming antagonistic, they start threatening, which happens a lot in negotiations, a lot of threats. And it's just like, you know what? I'm not even going to recognize that. I'm going to put that on the shelf. Eventually I'll come back to it, but I'm not going to attack it. I'm going to see that threat and I'll put it on the shelf for right now. Because you know what? For me, that's not what I want right now.
It's not productive.
For me, that's what I use to ground myself. And then it's also, which then turning back to a productive conversation is about just reaching back to what are the common goals? What are the common interests?
Yeah. Well, I think you also touched on, Ryan, really super important is the why. Why is this person being aggressive? Why is this person making threats? Why is this person pushing back and trying to get that 10% discount, right? Have we, because it could very likely be that we have not done a good job explaining, why we think it's important that they renew, why they're going to need to potentially pay more, right? Have we not, or have we not delivered on the value promise that was set, right? Or has maybe we delivered on the value promise, but maybe our key contacts internally haven't messaged that. Or the person that we're dealing with doesn't understand the value that's been created. So awesome. Brian, thank you for your question. Dan, if you can hit the done button there so we can move him over to the answer tab. Awesome. And just a reminder, folks, we will go till 15 past the hour. So if you can stick around, we will continue to answer questions. But for those that need to leave at the top of the hour, you will be able to watch the recording and view the transcription on our website early next week. Kathleen asks, could you walk us through a tough negotiation you had and the outcome? Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you, Kathleen. Ryan, looks like you want to jump in on this. So tell us about your difficult negotiation.
Yeah. So right now we're going through a lot of different changes on, just at OpenDoc. We were recently acquired, or not recently, it was a little over a year ago we were acquired. And so there's been a lot of changes happening when it comes to billing, when it comes to pricing, and when it comes to, how we're handling support, and even the client success role has changed some. And so obviously the most sensitive topic right now for us and our client base is pricing. And some of our clients were having to do 100, 150, 200% price increases on their renewals. And so obviously no client wants to hear that they're going to have to pay a 200% increase. I don't like when people ask me for more money. I know that my clients don't like it either. So recently I had a client, one of our larger enterprise clients, that's going to need 135% rate increase. And so we started the renewal conversation about 60 days before their renewal, kind of just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, hey, this is our new standardized pricing, which is roughly 700% over what they're paying. And so I just tore the Band-Aid off and I went straight for the 700%, and obviously there was a lot of stickers. They're like, whoa. But that was a tactic I did intentionally. I wanted to get the shock and awe done. Hey, eventually you're going to be at this point. And so taking it from there and then walking it back to a more reasonable price, we ended up at that 135%, increase for their annual renewal. But even at that price point, there was a lot of back and forth, and they were not thrilled about it. And so, actually, my team leader's on this call. Her name's Valisa. She's been, steadfast and had my back the entire time, and was, this is a price point we want to be at, and she supported me through all those calls. Kind of touching on what we were talking about earlier, is matching the level of the call. They had their leaders come in, so I had my next level of leadership come in, and the client was pushing hard. We had 3 different calls where we want to drop the price, we want to drop the price, we want to drop the price, and we just stayed strong. We consistently delivered on our product. We are delivering, and this is the new price. And no matter how much flack they gave us, we just kind of just stood our ground. This is what it's going to be. And we ended up going back to analyzing the account, kind of their use case and how much they're utilizing the platform, and discovered, hey, you have several locations that aren't using a platform. We could possibly remove those. You're still going to have the same per location cost, but it'll bring the total cost down. And after more negotiations, they ended up keeping all locations, and we're now going into the contract phase. And so I think that it is really important that we as CSAs, as CSMs, understand that a lot of times when our clients are pushing back, it's not because we are not delivering value. It's because they have their own quotas to meet as well. And so all that noise that you're hearing from them might not be legitimate noise. And so being able to kind of just stand our ground, I think, is very important.
Yeah. Dan, Patrick, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I love getting the sticker shock out of the way first. Working at Salesforce, we're more expensive than the vast majority of our competitors out there. So sticker shock is part of my job on a daily basis. And thinking about this, what a challenging negotiation I had was, and I'm sure not all of you will have to go through this. Hopefully at one point you will, but working with the CFO on rewriting a contract. It's part of a renewal, but really just getting down into the numbers. And Ryan, to your point, he had an agenda. He's a CFO. He wants to reduce costs as they're going into an uncertain period for their business. Well, it's my responsibility to go back to value and go back to how we're partnering together. But after he got really heated and said a few choice words I won't share here, I just very calmly asked him, would you approve that discount for your team? And it stopped him. And I think changing the perspective a little bit on, hey, look, I have a leadership, I have a responsibility to my company to protect the price. If you were talking to someone in my shoes at your company, you would do the exact same thing. And he still got a phenomenal deal because they were a fast-growing company. But I think it helped humanize the conversation and help move us forward beyond something that may or may not have been a big rock we couldn't move.
I've used that tact multiple times. Would you do that deal with your own team, with your own company, if you were me? When it got to that point, usually doesn't get to that point, but
that's actually one of the parts in the process of establishing what are standards. What are the standards that this would be measured against? A good example is when you think about standards is like salary negotiations example. If you're going in and asking for a raise that's, incredibly high, that, again, there's a lot of research out there about, you can go out and research salaries, but if you're asking for something that is way beyond the norm for the requirements of that role, the education, whatever it may be, you got to establish that negotiation and standards, and that comes from research.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Kathleen, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Ryan, if you can, awesome. Thank you.
You
We got another question here. Looks like another one for Ryan from Jennifer on LinkedIn. Jennifer, thanks for the question. Question for Ryan. What resources did you use to practice your negotiation skills with your family and friends to get confident in this area? Any resources for talk tracks, for example?
So really early on in my career, fresh out of high school, kind of into college, I did some telesales jobs. And so, it's, well over 20 years ago at this point. So I don't remember a lot of those resources, but they kind of taught me some of the fundamentals of sales. And so, I learned early on that I don't do well with talk tracks. I do much better in an organic conversation. I'm also much more comfortable in a more of a consultative sales and negotiation approach. So for me personally, I was lucky enough that in the RV and service management roles, I had leadership that were very knowledgeable on the sales and negotiation side of things. So they took time out of their day to kind of help get over some of those internal hurdles that I had and getting more familiar with that. So I didn't really use any specific, referenceable resources, just the resources around me. And then, like I said, just getting more comfortable with, identifying where my strengths are in the sales and negotiation side of things. I don't do good with the hard sales approach. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like it when people do it to me. I have a hard time doing it to other people, but coming from a more consultative approach, it helps build, if you have a lot of product knowledge, if you've taken time to become a true expert in your field, you're able to come at that conversation as a subject matter expert. And that really breeds, confidence in you as the CSM or as the salesperson. It also helps breed confidence in your product. And then the client is much more willing to kind of buy from you or have faith in what you're telling them. So, unfortunately, I don't have any resources that I could point to for you. I wish I did. I would say, for me personally, where I found success was identifying where I'm comfortable. And so I would say for anybody that's wanting to improve their skills in negotiation is find where your confidence lies. If your confidence is in doing research and understanding your product, then focus on that and build your confidence there. If you're more confident in, the hard sales approach, there's a lot of resources out there for that as well. Do your research there and focus on polishing that skill. And then once you're confident in your skill set, then you can start learning the others, because it is important to know all spectrums of sales. Because if I get into a conversation with somebody that's very aggressive, then I need to be able to have those hard sales skills. Might not be my preferred method, but you still need to have those skills. So first step one is identifying, kind of where you're comfortable. And then step two is really mastering where you're comfortable and getting to be a subject matter expert in where you're comfortable. And then third is all of the other areas that you're uncomfortable. You start building on those. Hopefully that answered the question.
Awesome. Not so shameless plug here. We do have an understanding negotiation fundamentals module in our level 4 training, and it has a couple of exercises built into that, including getting past no and how to develop an empathy map and building influence plans and all sorts of stuff. So there definitely is some stuff available in our content. Patrick, Dan, any other thoughts, suggestions on practicing negotiation skills that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll kind of pile on to Ryan a little bit. And Ryan, you said it earlier, and Jennifer has it here in her question. Friends and family, they're the best. Every one of us has someone who is just nails, is good at negotiating, knows how to lay down the law. And for me, Andrew, that's Sarah, my wife. She's very good at negotiating.
Yes,
she wins most of the time, but she has made me a lot better.
Yeah. Sarah's negotiation powerhouse.
Yeah.
She lulls you into false sense of security.
And then she goes in for the hard sell, right?
And then she goes in and she goes into the S.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sweet. Ryan, do me a favor, hit done on that. We've got through 3 questions. Woo. Let's see. So Sid asks, how is negotiation different for sales manager in comparison to customer success manager? Dan, looks like you want to jump in on that. So Dan, what have you got to say to Sid?
Yeah, I'll chime in on that quickly and then pass it over to the rest of the team. I think, as a CSM, and my experience is really kind of a combination of account executive and customer success person, because I have current customers and I need to make sure they're successful. But when you come in from the angle as a CSM, you come in from a position of strength and power, as long as you have been delivering the value. And Andrew, that's something you've been hammering on a lot in our conversations. If you understand the value they're capturing, if they understand the value they're capturing, then it makes it a lot easier. And it goes back to, the business success they're driving toward. Whereas sales oftentimes is you don't have that historical context. You don't have that knowledge that you're already delivering value for them. So I would really lean into that.
And that's kind of all built on this whole concept of, we talk about it just in our level 1 courses about nailing the onboarding, building a success plan that has quantifiable success metrics that you can achieve, value you can point at, blah, blah, all that stuff. Super important. People say, what's the secret to a renewal? The secret to a renewal is doing what you said you were going to do. Okay. It's that simple, right? Yep. I sold you this promise and I've made it now a reality. And not only have I made it a reality, everybody involved understands that we've made it a reality and the value is there. Right? There's no more than that. There's no secret. That's how you get renewals. Patrick, anything to add?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about value, we're talking about in customer-facing roles, whether you're in sales, customer success, implementation, we're talking about value, delivering value all the time. And it becomes like this almost ethereal concept of delivering value. Well, if you look at what value is, it's what is important to me, which is, or the customer in this case. And that goes back to their interests. And so during the negotiation process of when sales was working with them, or in customer success or implementation, when you were delivering that value, you're meeting their interests. And so you need to understand what those interests are and how you're meeting those. It goes back to exactly what you said about meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. So that's where I look at value and go, can I map almost, kind of like from the original sales cycle, these are what was laid out as their interests. These are the things that during implementation they had interest in. Am I meeting those? So it's not just this kind of big like value concept. It becomes much more tangible.
Yeah.
And that helps on the account renewal side as well.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Sid, thank you for the question. Dan, if you could hit done on there. So another LinkedIn live question from Lori. I've heard others use the 5 whys in such a way that it is very aggressive. How do you tone this down? Patrick, you want to jump in on this?
I think one, understanding the relationship going into it, but also for me, I lead with curiosity. And it's really that. I mean, Dan talked about that earlier about being curious in the sales cycle. I think it just goes back to, if you're like, well, why? Well, what, or, I think about.
You're not poking the bear. You're not doing why. It's like, no, help me. You're trying to help. I want to understand better.
Or my 5-year-old niece was, well, why? Well, why? Well, okay. It's cute, but it can get annoying. And so it's like, no, I'm really curious. I want to understand why, so I can figure out how we can meet those needs and deliver value for you, because those are what your interests are.
With your 5-year-old niece, you can at least, get to a point and say, well, just because. right? But you can't do that with your customers, right? You can't do that with your customers.
That's why.
Because I said so. Exactly. Yeah. There's this with my 13-year-old, when she starts using the 5 whys technique on me, like, because I said so, it gets to that point. Awesome. Dan, Ryan, anything to add on 5 whys?
Just touching on some things I said previously, making sure that when you have somebody that's getting overly aggressive in the negotiation process, is just taking that step back and then trying to slow down the conversation. And I think that'll help you overcome that specific issue. And so that's kind of my thought process on that.
Yeah, and last thing I'll add to that is what's worked for me in the past is having a reason and maybe a short story as to why you're asking why so many times.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're going to get into a contentious conversation because you're curious and someone doesn't want to open up. But if you really educate them on the purpose of your line of questioning and how that can help them win more and what they're trying to accomplish and what their interests are, it's worked for me in the past to disarm some folks.
Yeah. Awesome. Patrick, hit that done button for me, please. Christina, once again, we're going to keep going here. We'll get through as many questions as we can in the next 15 minutes, but we realize that some of you have to drop off here at the top of the hour. So don't forget to come back and watch the rest of the recording. Let's see. Christina asks, how would you address a customer who throws the cancellation ball at you in order to get what they truly want? Once again, I would ask, have you done a good job demonstrating value? And have you done a good job achieving value and demonstrating value and disseminating that value? It's while subscription economy especially is a low barrier to entry and it's also a low barrier to exit, there is an effort required to switch. And if somebody throws the cancellation ball at you and you know that you've delivered value, you're in a pretty strong position, right? Are they bluffing? I don't know. I would kind of. It's very much an it depends response because there's a lot more that you need to know and understand about that situation. But I wouldn't necessarily, if they throw the cancellation ball at you, I wouldn't necessarily jump all that quickly. What do you think, Ryan?
Sorry. No, yeah. I completely agree. This is because of some of the things that we're having to do on my side specifically with rate increases and all these annual contract renewals and price increases. This is something that gets thrown around a lot, and so I think goes back to some of those key key skills that we're using before we even get into this conversation: active listening, empathetic responses, and listening with that empathetic ear, and then doing that research before you even get into the call. So you should know if they're successful on the platform that they're using, and if they make that threat, then you don't even let it phase you. Say, hey, I understand that these are our terms and conditions, kind of whatever their thought is, and you just move on from it. Now the flip side of that is if they're not utilizing the platform and they're not getting that value, then start asking the questions. Why aren't you using the platform? Why are you not seeing value? What does success look like to you? Mm-hmm. And take that big step back and maybe develop that success plan with the client and say, I hear you. I understand that we're not fulfilling our mission to you. So let's build this success plan and try to retain them that way. And then ultimately, if they are going to churn, if they are going to cancel, then just let it go. It's, unfortunate when it happens, but, trying to fight that, that cancellation, that energy can be used elsewhere. You might have other clients that are going to be better benefited by your efforts. And so try not to let it phase you, and try to just move on into a positive space. That's kind of my philosophy on that.
I like that. I think you should be if something like that happens, that should be a red flag. Did we, to you, to say, did we actually do a good job achieving what the customer was trying to achieve? And I would look at it as an opportunity. Hey, I got a customer who's threatening to cancel.
Absolutely.
Did we not do a good job explaining? Did we not do a good job achieving what they're trying to achieve and making sure that everybody in their stakeholder community understands the value that's been achieved? I'd look at that as a learning moment.
Yeah, absolutely. More often than not, when the churn and cancellation topic comes up, I've been fairly successful in turning those into growth accounts. Identifying where they're not getting the and that's kind of the mindset that I try to have, is go into that conversation with, you're going to retain them and you're going to grow their use. So try to overcome the objections, try to identify their problems, show them the value, and then grow the account. And having that kind of positive mentality, even before the call, is a big help.
And that goes back to the whole mindset that, Patrick, you brought up at the beginning, right? Having the right mindset when you're going into these conversations, and what Dan mentioned about you need to show up with the intention to learn something, to understand better your customers.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll also add here, when threats, and since we are, negotiation, and we haven't mentioned it up to this point, is a term in negotiation around BANTA. What's a BANTA? Knowing your BANTA, which is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And if someone does threat to say leave, you can, what are your alternatives? So if they're your only customer, okay, your alternatives is kind of limited. But if you have many customers and they're very small and they're kind of a pain, okay, well, you've got other alternatives. And, the best, most people think of BANTA is, again, back to sales and car sales. If I'm selling, my car, and, Dan offers me $6,000, but I know I've got an alternative that Andrew is going to offer me $8,000. Okay, well, I've got a better alternative. I'm not going to go settle for something less than the alternative. So it's important to know that, and that comes from the preparation we talked about earlier.
It comes from the preparation, exactly. For sure. We actually refer to BANTA as well in the course. Dan, anything to add? Or are you good? Was that exhaustion of enough?
No, it was an
to Christina's situation.
An interesting concept for me, because I don't have any alternatives in my role. Yeah. I got 2 customers and a very high quota.
Yeah.
So there's no lose in the scenario,
right.
But I do think it depends. And I see it as an opportunity to grow. And Ryan, I love hearing it. You have great NRR. So love hearing you can spin that conversation.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do my best to. Not always successful, but try to.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing. It's you're not always going to be successful. You got to be okay with every once in a while. Hopefully you have a lot more wins than losses, right? You have a lot more. Let's forget about bad use of terminology, not a win. I want to have more positive outcomes, because I want it to be a positive outcome for me and my customer than
Absolutely.
Negative outcomes, right? So, Toby asks, for my renewals, I usually run into clients who actively explore other options because of cost. I've been taught in the past to jump to accommodate so they don't even get the option to explore other vendors. What are your recommended negotiation strategy when they start name dropping competing vendors, especially if they're actively taking meetings? Ryan, you wanted to jump in on this first.
Yep. Goes right into some of the topics I brought up earlier about, dealing with this day to day. There's a lot more companies jumping into the tech space and logistics. And so there's a lot of new competitors coming to the market, old competitors that are established in the market. And so conversation that I've had quite a bit. I'd say the first way to combat this is to actually understand your market space. So understand who your competitors are and understand the difference between what you offer and what they offer. And so if they are looking at a competitor that you're familiar with, you can say, hey, I'm familiar with that competitor. These are their price points. These are the features that they offer. This is what we offer. And find the strengths of your product over the other product. But it's key not to talk down the other product. You don't want to talk about another product negatively. That can actually deter the conversation. But just say, these are the features that we have that, I think are a better fit for your organization. And then, taking it from there, start discussing the cost of moving to that other vendor. A lot of people will start, a lot of clients will start bringing up that they're going to move to a competitor, but they're not factoring in the cost of moving to that vendor. It's not just the cost of that new product. It might be a direct offset to the cost of your product, but they're going to have to uplift all of the data from the one platform to the other. It might not be compatible. There might have to be some, back-end API integrations that have to happen, and all of that costs money. And so, definitely making sure to touch on, the pain points of what it's going to take to move. And then, back to the, empathetic ear and the active listening, understand why they want to make the move, and then trying to address those problems specifically.
And it's not just about the cost of moving data or, the switching costs of the hard costs of there's the training, but there's also, this is when we were asking people to do something differently. I guarantee you that if they're trying to move to a competitor, they do things differently than your product. So there's a change management effort that needs to go into this, right? And that can be incredibly costly. You're likely going to need to change the way people work, and that's going to slow people down. You're going to get more resistance if people are comfortable with the way that they're working. So there's that change management effort that this person who is threatening to go to a competitor may not be considering, especially if they're not your key stakeholder, who's the one that actually needs to be driving that adoption, right? Because as I've talked about, for those of you who've participated in these before, when we've talked about change management is not something that customer success is directly responsible for. Change management is a role that customer success plays to enable those inside your customers to drive adoption. So awesome, Toby. Thank you for the question, Patrick. Dan, you want anything that you want to jump in on with Toby's questions? Toby's question about jumping to accommodate.
Yeah, just quick comment here. It really depends on where you are in the market. To be honest, I've worked at a tech company in the past where we didn't have the best product out there. And oftentimes we did win on price because we were cheaper. Unfortunately, a lot of us are in those shoes. So understanding kind of where you are in relationship to the market and other options out there. So sometimes, dropping the price to accommodate. But I think it goes back to something you brought up, Andrew, around risk tolerance for change. And in this economy and this uncertain environment right now, risk is something that people are not willing to tolerate. They already have enough of it.
Awesome. That is very true. Toby, thanks for the question. We've got another question from LinkedIn. It's from a Sarah, and it's directed to Dan. Wants to jump in. This isn't your Sarah, is it? What is the technique where you're guiding them in negotiating, but they in the end think it is their idea, but you are leading them to that conclusion? Is that the technique that Sarah uses on you?
Day in, day out, and that's why we have a successful relationship.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know what the name of the technique is. This is something I need to work with my customers on all the time because we have very high value projects, products, and challenging migrations of solutions. But the overall technique is really kind of sitting on the same side of the table as your customer, understanding what they're going through and asking them the questions that maybe they're not leading questions that you know the answer to. We're going to help them think and help them understand what the solutions are and what the options are. And I've had the opportunity to do that recently on site with a customer going through a 2-day workshop. And generally I kind of understood where the conversation was going to go based off of my experience with other companies. But if I led them too much, then it wouldn't go anywhere. They were the ones who had to get up and do the whiteboarding. They were the ones who had to get up and actually click the buttons in the voting to make it part of their decision, not my decision. And that is really where I see a lot of change and fundamental change happening with my clients.
Patrick, Ryan, anything to add?
No, I think it was fantastic.
Awesome. Sarah, thank you for the question. We got probably time for one more. Lambert, who asked this question a long time ago. I hope you're still on so we can answer it for you. And Lambert's not on. Well, let's answer it anyways in case he watches the replay. Why do we have to negotiate even when it's more in line with sales manager's role? I know we as customer success managers trying to manage customer after sales hands off by starting to build rapport. Ryan, you wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah. So I think that, one thing that, Patrick had touched on very, very early on in the call was negotiation isn't just about renewals. It isn't just about sales. There's another aspect to our role that negotiation skills directly impact, and that would be if there's a tech support issue that is escalated to development, or if there is a feature request that the client has, negotiating the expectation of the client. That conversation in and of itself is a negotiation. You're going back and forth. They might want to have a solution in a day, and your SLA is for 30 days. So you have to negotiate their understanding of what your SLA is. You have to negotiate their expectation. And so, negotiation skills aren't just about money. It's about expectation management, and it's about communicating the overall goal of your organization. And then, to just add a little tag on the end, a lot of client success managers, customer success managers, they do negotiate renewals. Lots of companies are, especially now with the economy and the shape that it's in, they're increasing their prices. They're changing their billing model that is going to directly affect their clients. And so that is an active conversation that we have to have on a regular basis, not just at my organization, but all organizations across the board. So these negotiation skills aren't just about price. It's about every aspect of what we do when you put your mindset in that role.
Exactly. We're negotiating when we're building the success plan. We're negotiating the kickoff.
Yep.
Now, as I kick things off, there's a lot of negotiation that we as customer success managers do on a daily basis with our customers. So, and at this point, I'm going to have to negotiate that we're at the end of the time we have for today. I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think. It's what all you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. I want to thank my amazing panelists for spending the time with us and for the ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices that you shared. One final note, great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on September 21st, when we'll talk about using emotional intelligence to improve customer relationships. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody.